So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries. As the holy cities are returning, and the first holy city of the Savior on the land of Cush, then we find ourselves evaluating what's going on then with Daniel the 11th chapter. Let's evaluate what some of these countries of the time of the seat. Try to understand this factor. We are mostly concerned with those countries who were involved with the understanding of the New World Order after 1009. Let's say, for instance, we understand very precisely that some of the nations of the Middle East, they are very old. Some of them, for instance, Iran, Iraq, Syria, for instance, Libya, those places of the Middle East, they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years old of culture, understanding amongst themselves. So let's then evaluate from the time of the Holy Instructions, where then we understand Ibrahim then, or Abram was then first his name, and then he left the land of Ur. So those places around Iran, Iraq, the region of Syria, for instance, those places are very old. They were around for a long time. Now, if we want to understand the Holy Instructions, we must be then concerned and learn the Eastern cultures. Obviously, learning of China, because China was active during the time of the Holy Instructions also. China was always active. But then, if we want make a detour and then understand the Holy Instructions based from the Israelic lineage, let's then evaluate nations involved with the New World Order. So then, New World Order simply means the Eastern culture that came also from the Messiah himself was then eliminated in 1009. The New World Order then started new groups of countries and kingdoms, thus entering the time of the seat, no holy cities. The spirit of the Messiah directed by the holy cities were then destroyed. As a substitute of the spirit world from the cities of the Messiah came then a scoundrel, a cop-out, this false savior of Jesus of some sort. He was the worst scoundrel that was ever invented. So then, as we understand, there is a true Savior. His name is Yahweh Yeshua, from the lineage of Yitzhak. And then we understand there is a false Savior concocted during the time of the Greco and the Romans, and mostly used during the time of the seat. So then, the countries that were born during the time of the seat, such as United States, was then born because there was an objective of the second portion of the 1,000 years given then to the beast, the facet of the seat. 800 years was granted in Great Britain, and then a couple of hundred years to America. Both of them led the world during 1,000 years. But the problem is the time of 1,000 years has ended. But they want to extend this time further, but they can't. The sons of Ishmael won't let. Based from these, today, for instance, the Brick Post came out an article related with more sanctions upon the Soviet Union. So let's then evaluate very precisely, because those sanctions won't work. The Soviet Union is a very strong partner of China. And if US is playing scoundrel from behind the scenes and trying to entice, for instance, Vietnam and the purchase of the kilo category submarines and trying to inject the trouble in South China Sea and provoking conflicts, what China has to do simply to protect the Soviet Union is simply do not export any more products to US. And that's the end of the country. So, playing scoundrel, there are always a couple of facets. You can be very much friend of many of the scoundrel friends, or can bring a person reality. China owns a great deal of debt of the United States. And the United States without China simply can't function. Militarily speaking, in many other areas, industry, transports, US could barely get by with provisions for itself. Barely. So as far as the European Union trying to scare away the Soviets, they are very wrong. Daniel himself spent time writing the holy instructions, as you can read in the 11th chapter and the 12th chapter, the 2nd chapter. And at the end of times, those nations evolved with a time of deceit. They would try to adhere to each other, but they would not. So then, as we understand, the Eurozone is stagnated. As you can understand, the USD is also stagnated. And yesterday came out a very important article also from the Brick Post, and the Soviet Union and China then tried to get rid of the USD. It was a very smart move. Extremely important, because China must prevail. In every area, science, technology, computers, China must win. So then, as far as the Soviet Union at the moment is going through some tough times, but let's make it very clear that the problem with Ukraine does not come from the Soviet Union or from Mr. Putin or from Moscow. The person or the persons provoking over there is simply Ukraine, because Ukraine wants to become and wants the side of the West, and the United States uses then this situation then to provoke conflict with Moscow, to impose its junky laws and regulations. So then, China and the Soviet Union are very much friends. And if what it takes for China to become then the first, simply don't export anymore to the United States. And that's the end of it. Prior of going to this far, there is also an understanding of coming later with great wealth, explains then the despised one, Daniel 11, verse number 21. In Brazil, a few months ago, there was a special article related with the USD exchange in Brazil, and there were some sections of this exchange they had to pay some sort of related with taxes, or some exchange type of a penalty, or no, it wasn't penalty, but it was part of the taxes involved. So from 0.38 it went more than 6%. It's a very specific form of taxing or charging. This was the proper word. Charging then the exchange percentage for the exchange charge. So then, during this time where China then must become the first, then comes the holy instructions in teaching us that we are dealing with a country extremely old. China has more than 4,000 years of history. That's a long time. US has barely a couple of hundred years. Can you compare a couple of hundred years or so with 1,000, and then a couple of thousand, and then another 1,000 on top, and 4,000 and more? Can't even compare it. Who do you think is going to win? What has the Creator Himself said? And the kingdom of the East shall to receive the leadership of the trade of this age. Later on we come to the second transition, where China then shares the leadership with the sons of Ishmael, and then the merchants of the earth uses the new system given by China, plus the crude or the oil, fuel, for the merchants to do their work. Infrastructuring and reconstruction, rebuilding, so then people can get back to their normal lives. So then, since we understand from the prophecies of Yeshayahu, you find in the chapter 1:8 a very important prophecy. Explains then very importantly that the Gentiles also were included in the plan. At some point you can read chapter 1:8 and the layers thereof from other chapters. You find then the Gentiles were granted a position of service, as then you read taking care of the fields, being your tenders, taking care of your flocks, your vineyards. These obviously explains the place of the Gentiles testifying on behalf of the Savior Himself and becoming part of the new plan. The cities of the Messiah must return. But then the Creator Himself, He is very wise, very smart. He is the smartest. So then it takes some time for us to get used to this situation. Yet sometimes people, they go in the wrong direction, and the Creator Himself simply points out His ways. And His ways are found in the Holy Instructions. And some people, that's how you interpret. No, that's precisely what the prophet said. Now, if we don't understand the Eastern culture, the Holy Instructions then can't be twisted for Western usage. As far as we can understand from Daniel, he was a tradesperson. We can also read a layer related with Daniel the prophet. The 23rd chapter explains then the merchants. Let's then read it for a bit, 23rd chapter, 9th verse. Whose crowning then the merchants of the earth, they are chief traders, where their opinions then are very weighty. Their opinions are very strong. Layers related with the time of the restoration period excludes government. There is only a government where the Creator himself makes a relation with, is related with the holy cities of the Messiah. That's his government, and he has the best government. The rest of the governments are not governments. They're a group of scoundrels. Liking it or not, but they do their best. Understandable, they do their best. But the government should be used to is the Creator himself government. As we read, for instance, in Romans, let every soul be subjected to the kingdom to come government. Thus then the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries are returning. Thus we must listen to the holy cities. The rest of them are not governments. They are simply blind leading the blind. As we understand from these, merchants then obviously are coming very shortly. China holds the trade of the world, and then they have 57% of the world's trade is already on hands of China. So they simply lead the world of trade. Now China is then the dragon of the East. They are very responsible, hard-working people, and they always place the precision via computer of their own trade. Every transaction is then calculated with a certain amount. Then we find many other countries joining up with China. In a very short while, people can invest on products via the computer, using a system, a monetary system of China, and investing and receiving via the same line. So then later on the merchants of the earth can do their work, and governments of this age besides the holy cities are then placed aside. So then, let's read a section of the combat of the end, because sometimes when people they get desperate, they start doing stupid things. People they're trying desperate to get some sort of a control from an era that does no longer exist. The combat of the end you find, for instance, in Zechariah the 5th chapter. You find the 8th chapter of Revelation. Then comes the very time of the end. The earth is yet saved for another 10 plus 7 or 8 years, discounting then the reduction of time from Michichiahu the 24th chapter. Have this in mind. When Gog and Magog they release their bombs, you find then Israel is going to send a bomb then to Arabian nations, precisely then where there is lots of petroleum, and the petroleum is going to gush into the ocean, and third part of the ocean is going to die. Then a second bomb goes straight on China. Unfortunately, because US can't bear the understanding of not leading the world anymore. So let's prepare ourselves and understand, most of us who are testifying on behalf of the Messiah using the Israelic lineages, understanding of the instructions. We won't be there. Some people say, we're going to be around until the Savior returns. No, we won't be around. Testifiers on behalf of the Messiah, they die roughly around the 6th chapter of Revelation. There is a specific paragraph over there that the souls of those who were then under the altar, they were being protected by the holy cities via the Spirit, and they were concerned for how long they would have to remain in this infernal situation outside of the holy cities, and yet they were reminding themselves of those who went already and they rested. Testifiers like themselves. And then a voice from heaven said, a bit longer, until the destruction of every person testifying on behalf of the Messiah then would be completed. So every testifier on behalf of the Messiah must be dead. Only remains the holy cities and then the evil of the world. Then the sounds of the shofars, they take place, and at the very end, then the Messiah shows up and rescues his people from the holy cities only. Those outside, they die. This earth becomes then a flame of fire, a burning planet. Then those souls who are in torment in first death and Sheol are thrown into this earth while burning and destroyed. Thus this age then ends. So then, those people who are teaching that there is yet 1,000 years, you go to some churches, you would not believe what those people say. Some churches, they don't even understand Revelation. Can you imagine? They are speaking situations of the future and they are not revealed. If you can't explain Revelation, then you are not revealed. You are not saved. And you can't bear fruit. You always find mockers. The Messiah was mocked many times. Noah was mocked. The Shalishim were mocked. But the situation is, we must save our souls. I want to save my soul. I want to be diligent every day until the time comes, and then I want to go to rest. I want to rest from my labors, because it is very exhausting. Explaining the instructions, reading the holy instructions, recording and doing this work is very exhausting. And my videos and my audios are not for entertainment. Either you listen and you want to save your soul, or upon death you go straight down. You can make a choice on your own. Some people, they think when they die, then they go to heaven. The first myth: there is no heaven to go to. Those who are the Messiah and they are testifying on his behalf as per the instructions of Moses, as they do instruct the people via Moses' teachings. Then the Messiah came and he instructed the people regarding the spring feast. As we maintain this line and we produce fruit, then the soul is saved, as long as we remain ourselves on a path. Now, if you claim yourself of being only fruit inspector, you only gaze around those people who are doing the work, mocking around and trying to inspect someone else's life, you shouldn't have a concern of your very own. Because there is no heaven to go to. Those people who are not in the Messiah, they are judged. It's past tense. There is no place in heaven where people are going to show themselves before the presence of the Savior himself, before the judgment seat of the Savior. There is no such. The Greco and the Romans translated wrong. Each person upon death, they are judged. It's past tense. Because we are then being compared with the measuring stick of the Holy Torah. Completion of the first, starting of the second tabernacle services, and then the restoration period. So there are thousands of pastors and teachers and evangelists, and they are not revealed, so they are not saved. They are blind leading the blind. And human beings in the condition of sin where the world is at, sound teachings, sound explanations of the holy instructions, it's never nice listening. Because evil lives in people. The flesh always wants fleshly things. A person who was never involved with the holy instructions, listening to these layers, they can't stand it. Oh, but of course. Explaining then a situation of salvation. There is an area where Shaliach Shaul was explaining. Those who died in the Messiah shall rise first. The situation was explained before. People were not coming from the dead anymore from this age. When the Savior, the Messiah, was completing the spring feast, he gave, as always when we read the Torah, the instructions, we read the prophets, the writings. Ruach HaKodesh always gives the understanding. It's given. A person does not obtain by earning it. Let me rephrase the whole situation. A person can't earn via study what should be given. Rephrasing once again. You can't buy the holy instructions for your own use. As far as we can understand, those who are in the Savior, they do their work, and there are many times that a person then can't maintain a life exemplary, but the dam of the Messiah provides so they can become clean and remaining on the path. And then studying the holy instructions always gives us more. Bearing fruit is not easy either. If a person was never instructed of reading the holy instructions every day and trying then to record and listen, it's not easy. My videos are coming to a couple of thousand videos and audios. So if it wasn't given by Ruach HaKodesh, each video, each audio, then would not bear any fruit. But it does. Then explains those people then later, those who died in the Messiah first wilt be then raised first, obviously, but not in this age. When this earth is reformed, is refurbished, is renewed, then those who died in the Messiah first wilt return first. So why then people are not coming from the dead? Obviously, when we read the holy instructions, the Messiah was completing the spring feast. He had to show his people he had Ruach HaKodesh and the 7 spirits of Elohim. One of them is spirit of healing, miracles, prophecy. So he sent them by groups, and then those people who were being obviously coming from the dead during the time when the Messiah gave the order, and until the first holy city on the land of Cush. From then on, there was no more reason to raising people from the dead, because the power of overcoming death was already acquired. So then, explaining then the vision of Zechariah, then he saw the holy city coming down from heaven. Okay. What he saw was the outcome of a place we have to build. When this earth then is reformed and the people then return from the dead or their resting places, then we must build for the Creator himself his holy place as per the instructions. It was done the first time with Moses, and the holy tent became the tabernacle per the instructions. It was then the temple. Later on it was another temple. And what do you think we are going to do when we return from the dead? We are going to build for him a house, a tabernacle. Mysticism is everywhere during this time of so many changes in technologies. People, they like the supernatural, they like strange situations, but the problem is the Creator was never strange. He's extremely stable. Of course, the word extremely for him doesn't make any sense, because he's never extreme. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. He is what he is. But for our standards, as people contaminated in this miserable world of sin, extremely simply means he is very stable. And he does not play mysticism. I'll give a few examples. Firstly, let's say for instance Gideon. That story over there of the plant, or then the flower over there that he was kind of squashing in his hands and our water would come out of it. This understanding he saw while in a dream. Moses, he never saw an actual burning bush. After he was chasing the animal over there that got lost from his flock, he went so far, and the flock did not like Moses. He was often in a run after the animals than otherwise. Then he got tired of it when he went out in the wild place over there, and he then sat down and he slept because he was exhausted trying to find that stupid animal. Then he saw in his dream the burning bush. Pharaoh in Egypt, he had dreams. Moses directed every day, are you going to let my people go? No. So these nights you're going to have this dream. And then Moses simply went away from his presence. The very night he had the dream, very specific. Then the next day Moses went in his presence, and he said simply, going to let the people go? No. These nights you're going to have this dream. Then Moses went away from his presence. The next day, then there was Moses. And previously he said, these nights you're going to have this dream. And it went on until the 10th. So the 10 plagues never had taken place. Those were dreams, but very real. Understandably, when people do not have the Eastern culture understanding, they tend to be mystical. When we return from the dead, as we can read from the holy instructions, we are going to eat with the Messiah and then get to work. Next time I'm going to evaluate then the Holy Covenant and relate with the Messiah, and then we might be able then have an explanation of the 65th and 66th chapter of Yeshayahu the prophet, post-autumn feast, explaining then when the earth is then renewed. I have these in mind. These present status of this planet Earth must be destroyed completely. Couple of bombs are going to take care of it. And then at the very end, a shout of sulfur. Let's hope as many as we can understand and instruct. Let's hope many more people will get saved. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.